So, this is our first video. Begin the segment. Share the title. Sexist college textbook says men are stronger than women. Let's see where he's going with this.
Most effective ways of finding truth. Not to say...
Hold on. Back to the beginning. There we go.
Currently, science is one of our most effective ways of finding truth. Not to say that it's the only way to find truth, but it's the most effective tool that we have. And the way science works is by using facts, reason, and evidence, or using logical arguments. Whereas if I'm going to provide an argument here, I might say that I believe this, and this is why. Here's my sources. Go.
How times have changed.
And you can either say, on the other side, you can say, I agree. You can say, I don't know enough about this subject. Let me get back to you, or let me consult somebody else. Or I might say, I disagree, and I disagree for this, 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 and this. As opposed to if you're disagreeing and you don't want to find truth, you just want to win, you might say, I disagree because I feel that this is true. I feel that I'm right, and I'm going to use any sort of manipulation I can find to make you wrong.
Such as perhaps nitpicking the points and completely misconstruing the intention of someone else's argument. But surely the man who posted this would never stoop to such levels. He's a believer in science.
And maybe that works if there's a contest. If there's something to contest that's kind of hard to figure out, like, I believe that weed cures cancer, or something like that. That's a little bit harder. But when there are things that have been proven truths that are very easy to identify, the things we all know. For example, I've heard a lot of women, not all of them, but quite a lot of women who are very into feminism say that women are just as strong as men. Here's a little example of that.
I think women are just as strong as men. I don't
Physically?
Yeah, I do.
But they're not, though, right?
Now, if you've been around for a while,
I'm just going to go back a second. Like, hold on. I'm just going to just zoom in a little bit here. Yeah, don't mind the overlay bleeding into other stuff. Just like, can we just appreciate that look on her face? Here, let's hear her say that again. Just real quick.
I think women are just as strong as men. I don't
Physically?
Yeah.
I don't even think she could say that with a straight face. That doesn't look like a straight face to me. This is why I keep saying, like, I honestly don't even know if even women genuinely believe their own bullshit. Alright, let's get that line back up. Probably won't do that too much. That was kind of neat to do that midstream.
I do.
But they're not, though, right?
Now, if you've been around for a while, obviously that is a ridiculous notion. And I'm going to even show it to you because I was a kinesiology major, so when I was in school, I basically took every single exercise class that was available because I didn't really know what type of field I wanted to be in, so I just basically tried all of them.
Okay, so for future context, when he talks about fitness, he's speaking as a kinesiology major. Just, so that we're aware of his credentials.
Now, if you plan this out correctly in college, you can do that because most of your shit's going to be GE, and so that's going to be most of your work, and then you have a very small amount of actual classes that you need. And so when you hit that small area, you can kind of just take everything. And one of these classes I took was exercise physiology. As you can see here was the book for that course. And this book is a particularly feminist style book. Here's a chapter that goes over the sex differences between men and women. And you can see from the very first page, it's very, very female focused. Let me read this for you. In the recent past, young girls typically were discouraged from participating in vigorous physical activity, while young boys climbed trees, raced against each other, and participated in various sports. The underlying notion was that boys were meant to be active and athletic, but girls were weaker and less suited or less well suited to physical activity and competition. Physical education classes furthered this idea by having girls exercise differently than boys, by running shorter distances and performing modified push-ups.
I mean, you see? This is accurate. Like, pointing out the hypocrisy in post-secondary education, using an actual textbook as a source. That's the thing. This is entirely reasonable. You understand why someone would go like, hey, this guy's pretty base, pretty red-pilled. So why is this video deleted? Could it be that perhaps this is inconvenient for you?
So you can see there's a very feminist notion behind that, where it's like, even though that these are scientists, they're still kind of running or kowtowing the feminist line, which is like, well, it's just, they have these social construct words where it's physical education classes further this idea. Like, it's not like something that's obvious that women.
If you mean feminist language, like using the phrase pay gap, wage gap, when what you mean to say is earnings gap. But no, still say that the wage gap exists. Absolutely. Let's keep going. I will be pausing somewhat often because this is meant to be a transformative experience. Much as I would like to just upload all the videos straight away, I think that just letting the video run for 22 minutes without giving any sort of reaction, not really a transformative work. So I got to give commentary at least once every couple minutes.
Women are not as strong as men by conforming to gender stereotypes and by giving girls modified push-ups. Let me just say, I've been a yoga teacher for about 5.5 years, and I've been doing yoga for about 7 years or so. In addition to my training in exercise science or kinesiology, or the layman's term would be physical education, but we don't like being, or people in this field don't like being called PE teachers, but basically I learned how to be a PE teacher. So what I've seen from my experiences in my class, and I've taught at this point thousands of people, and of course it's mostly women, so I can see women every day. Now, yoga's changed a little bit over the time, so it's not like men are absent. In some classes I have 1 or 2 men, some classes 30% of the class is men. And I've got to say that most women cannot do a proper push-up. There is a reason why it is a stereotype, or why we have the girl push-ups or the modified push-ups, is because most women cannot complete a full push-up. They either do the thing where they kind of, when you do a proper push-up, you're supposed to lower your hips and shoulders at the same time. When you do an improper push-up, a lot of times people will kind of dip their pelvic bone down, and they'll kind of like worm their way into the push-ups, and they'll lower their hips first when they lower down, and when they push up, they'll kind of raise their shoulders up first, like they're kind of like doing like an upward facing dog motion, basically. Whereas if you do a proper push-up, you're flat as a board. So your hips are either the same level as your shoulders, or they're like the tiniest bit below that. And you're going to lower flat as a board. Hips lower the same time as the shoulders, and they lift up the same time as the shoulders when you push back up.
You're seriously telling me, and that most women can't perform a proper push-up? Now, again, he doesn't have a source for this. What weight ratio? I'd understand, yeah, most women with a BMI over 24 can't, But are you seriously telling me that your average female between the ages of, say, 10 and 30 can't perform a proper push-up? Jeez. Seriously, like, to any woman that sees this, please, like, here's the diagram of a proper push-up. Like, please, try to do a proper push-up and see if you can. Now, I mean, if you can't even get all the way down because like your belly forms a cushion before your chin touches the ground, okay, you clearly have bigger problems than not being able to do a push-up. But like, if a woman of, you know, proper body size can't do it, like, just like cannot do it with good form, even one, I mean, I could understand maybe not being able to do 10, but one? Wow.
Most women can't do that. Some women can, but most of them can't. Most of them can't do that without modifying the push-up. Whereas on the opposite end, most men can. Very few men that have taken my classes can't do a push-up properly after they're instructed how to. Now, sometimes they don't know, and once they say it's like this, they can do it. Whereas a lot of women, I said, do it like this, and then no matter how much they try, they can't do it. They either do the worm, or they get about halfway down. Once they get halfway down, they kind of plop to the floor. They can't do the chin to the floor type of thing. So there's a reason why women do modified push-ups. It's not just a social construct. It's an actual physical genetic fact that, well, we'll continue with this. Now, our big reason, our big sex-based chemical that affects this is testosterone. So testosterone increases bone formation, which leads to larger bones.
Shout out to TFM, hormone of the gods, testosterone. Man, be thankful you have it, and try to naturally increase it if you can, because apparently it's decreasing significantly, so like, we got to put in the effort where we can to try to keep the levels up.
And increase protein synthesis. Protein synthesis is just like, the way you build up muscles, which in turn leads to increased muscle mass, and as a result, adolescent males are larger and more muscular than females. It already says it there, even though they're trying to suggest at the beginning of the chapter that this is a social construct, even though they're saying it's not. It's almost, well, this chapter might have been written by multiple people. And I was trying to look up who it was written by so I can give a little bit more background, but unfortunately, they didn't say. And these characteristics continue into adulthood. At full maturity, men not only have a greater muscle mass, but the distribution of muscle mass differs from that of women. Men carry a higher percentage of their muscle mass in their upper body compared with women, 42.9% men versus 39.7% women. Testosterone also stimulates erythropoietin, I believe you pronounce that as, production in the kidney by the kidneys, which leads to increased red blood cell production, as discussed later in the chapter. And I imagine what they're going with the red blood cell production is higher endurance capability, because you can transport more oxygen, which is going to increase your VO2 max and is going to make you more survivable in endurance activities. Because the idea with endurance is that you are slowly running out of energy, and just before you run out, you take that breath of oxygen, you do some synthesis of ATP, sorry, I said ADP, of ATP, which is your main energy molecule, and then you boom yourself back up and having energy. And so if you're very, very weak at endurance sports, you're going to crash. You'll be able to lift yourself back up a little bit, but then you're going to crash right back down. The people who are very efficient at endurance-based activities are going to, they're about to crash, they catch themselves. They're about to crash, they catch themselves, and they can go for 30 minutes. They can go for like 5 hours. So if you're going to have higher blood cell production, you're going to have higher oxygen absorption of the blood cells. You're going to be able to recover a lot better for endurance-based sports. So estrogen, the female sex-based chemical. Now,
all right, so there's your basic 101 on testosterone. But I mean, nothing openly objectionable, though I imagine that chronic headache minor seizure hearing that pronunciation. I'm not sure if it's right. I'd have to double check what the heck he said. But far from the only effects of testosterone, that's definitely the ones that at least would be relevant in a physical textbook. Continue.
Both of us, both men and women, have estrogen and testosterone. It's just that estrogen is predominantly a female thing, and there's a couple types of estrogen, by the way. Testosterone is the predominant male hormone. So estrogen also increases the growth rate of bone, allowing the final bone length to be reached within 2 to 4 years following the onset of puberty. As a result, females grow very rapidly for the first few years following puberty and then cease to grow. Males have a much longer growth phase, allowing them to attain a greater height. Because of these differences compared with fully mature males, fully mature females are on average about 5 inches shorter. They're about 30 pounds, they're 30 to 40 pounds lighter. They have...
Chat, I think I'm going to need a source to cite whether or not the average female is currently lighter than the average male. I mean, maybe under identical physical circumstances, but are we sure that that's still just the average these days? Let's continue.
Have a higher fat, that's irrelevant, higher fat mass and higher body fat percentage. They have higher body fat percentage because that's what they need to produce children. So if you have a fit-looking male...
I mean, let's be honest. If a man and a woman have an equal amount of fat, then either one of them has boobs that shouldn't, or doesn't have boobs that should, or ass as an alternative. Just saying, your fat percentage now, admittedly, 3 to 6 kilograms, 7 to 13 pounds. I mean, honestly, I've never weighed like ass and titties, but do you think that decent sized ass and titties weigh 7 to 13 pounds?
On average, they're going to want about maybe 10 to 12% body fat. If you're going to have a fit-looking female, they're going to want about maybe 15 to 18% body fat, and probably no lower than 15, and probably for women, probably no lower than 10 for men. But that's not going to affect these areas too much as far as my knowledge goes. The big thing is the estrogen. Certainly, as women get older and they age, they're a big worry for osteoporosis, where women will lose like half of their bone mass, which means bone mass is going to provide you a lot of your strength and a lot of your protection. So you're losing half of that when you turn 50 or so after you go through menopause is a pretty big deal, especially for women. Now, if you look at these little numbers here, we have 5 inches of height, which is a big deal. When I was in martial arts, if you were competing at the same skill level, and we had divisions where it's like the same weights, and we didn't really do any sort of grappling, so your weight doesn't matter that much. What would happen is if you were 5 inches taller, that means you had a bigger reach. Now your wingspan, which is how, if you hold your arms out, how far is it from your right hand, or the tip of your middle finger on your right hand, or the tip of the middle finger on the left hand? It's roughly that. That is very, very close to your actual height. And so if you're going to get 5 inches bigger in height, you might get about an inch more of reach on somebody else, which is a huge deal. Plus, this is probably just exclusive to fighting, is that 5 inches taller is going to make you a lot more intimidating. So certainly, if you're in a fight or if you're a soldier, being 5 inches taller is going to make you a lot harder to combat than someone who's 5 inches shorter, because naturally your brain is saying, this person's stronger than me because they're bigger than me. So
So let's see. So 1 inch more reach, 5 inches extra height. Like, I wonder how much of a height difference does there need to be for you to be able to hold somebody back with one arm and then be able to swing their arms and not hit you with their fists, or heck, fingers extended. Because I mean, like, I don't know about your guys' fingers, but I'd say mine are a good 4 inches, let's say. So that means like if I was going to hold someone back shoulder to palm and they were going to swing at me, they'd probably need 4 times 5 inches height difference. That'd be 20 inches of difference to not hit with fingers. Or like even fingertips. I mean, fingertips are reasonable, so like 2 inches, 10-inch difference, almost a foot. Yeah, so I mean, in a fight, yeah, 5 inches. Like, it's definitely a significant difference. But an extra 1 inch of reach per 5 inches of height? Hmm. Interesting. No, continue.
That's not a trivial difference, even though percentage-wise, it's not a very, you're going from, what was it?
AC. If he really did martial arts, he would know that dodging compensates for that extra inch or 2 or 3. Not having done extensive martial arts myself, I can't say. Could be a valid point there.
72 inches, or let's say 67 inches for a female, which would be 5'5", 5'7". I'm bad at math, but
Oh, wait. Alena saying great. I just find it weird that people are considering the strength between men and women and taking it seriously. We're not at war. Who cares? I'm pretty sure that the differences in fitness standards for men and women, the profession, like, Alena, let me make it very clear. If you don't acknowledge the strength between men and women, then there is a non-zero possibility that the next time firefighters come to your house and they need to carry an unconscious person out of the building, you will not get 5 male firefighters. You will get 5 female. Unlikely, perhaps. But there's a non-zero chance. If people genuinely believe and use their authority to genuinely place women in the positions of men, believing them to be equal. This has actual consequences beyond war. There are scenarios where life or death hangs in the balance based on the strength of individuals in certain positions. If you are placing women in the spots of men and expecting them to perform the same, people are going to die.
But let's say you're doing 67 inches versus 72 inches or so. Not an overall big difference, but in terms of actual physical capability, it is a big difference. Certainly, if you know anything about the UFC, if you know anything about grappling or like wrestling or judo, 30 to 40 pounds is a massive, massive deal. Now, it's been a while since I've actually looked at the weight classes of the UFC, but I think they are separated by about 20 pounds. So that's certainly enough to make a sizable and noticeable difference. And these are averages. So the average man is heavier and taller, which is already going to lead to specific advantages. Now, if you look at in terms of endurance is a more of a body weight based thing. So you can have what's called relative strength. So if you're a female in gymnastics, they typically want you to be very young, because by the time you get older, you're so tall that your relative strength is not as good as someone who is smaller. So if you're going to do tons of flips and tumbling in the air and on the mats, it's going to be a lot harder when you're bigger. Even though you might have the same amount of muscle, that muscle isn't as good as it was when you were smaller, because it's not going to be able to move as much of you. So you're dealing with a relative strength thing here as opposed to an overall strength thing when you talk about endurance, because I'm just lifting my own body weight. So these differences in actual endurance sports are very, very small. They're like 10% or 15%, even though men still win in every single category. Here's another one. Here's VO2 max. I've got 2 charts on this. VO2 max. You can see it's roughly the same. It's maybe about 15 or 20% if you look at the top males versus the top females, or the lowest male. Actually, if you look at the lowest males versus the lowest females, you get quite a bit of a bigger difference. All the dots are the the athletic people, and the lines are the average people. And even on average, even the non-athletes are still outperforming the non-athlete females.
Hey, Alex Chung, thank you very much for the subscribe. I doubt I could perform firefighter tasks. Considering that when I was less fit, I tossed a girl heavier than me onto my shoulders and actively sprinted with her as part of University Frosh Week. Getting winded? Yeah. But I can do it. Yet a woman of equivalent fitness? They can't. This is straight up. That was me when I was weak. Nowadays, I haul around shit the weight of women, well, petite women, on a day-to-day basis for 8 hours a day. So, keep talking out your ass, because I have no problem removing you. Continuing.
And here's a more number-based chart of the probably basically the same statistics. And so, endurance sports or VO2 max. Let me explain what VO2 max is, because you might not know what that is. So VO2 max is your ability to absorb oxygen. What they'll do is they'll hook you up to like a breath machine. And on this breath machine, I think they have to put you in like a cage too, or like a cage is probably the wrong word for it, like a giant box. Is if there's any airflow into the box, they're not going to be able to determine how much you breathe in or breathe out. So they'll basically, they'll either put you in a box or they'll put you in like a vent.
Elena, I was not talking about any firefighter studies. You're pulling that out, guys. I am merely presenting the scenario of male versus female firefighters. I did not mention a single study. So you're saying that those studies were debunked? Which studies? I'm just asking you, are you gonna be equally as reassured when 5 women pull up versus 5 men? Because I'm talking equivalent fitness level, as in didn't train, skinny as a rail, like did not go to the gym, and I was still able to firefighter carry a woman in her triple digits who was purposefully being dead weight. No, you're not going to get a woman who doesn't go to the gym doing that to a man that weighs more than her. Not a chance in hell. And, like, right here, like, we'll go back a second. Like, you want equivalent fitness level? There you go. Untrained women, untrained men. Undeniable differences in their absorption. This shit is genetic. The only way that a woman is even going to get close to performing men is if she, like, look, you have top performing women in the untrained category equal to the average untrained man. And the female athletes, they don't even break into like the above 25% of male athletes. And you're going to say, oh, it's equivalent fitness levels. Like, okay, but a woman's got to work way harder than a man to be as good as the low end of men in fitness. Like, come on.
This is your ability to absorb oxygen. What they'll do is they'll hook you up to like a breath machine. And on this breath machine, I think they have to put you in like a cage too, or like a cage is probably the wrong word for it, like a giant box. Is if there's any airflow into the box, they're not going to be able to determine how much you breathe in or breathe out. So they'll basically, they'll either put you in a box or they'll put you in like a ventilator, and they're going to measure how much oxygen comes in, and then they're going to measure how much oxygen comes out. So let's say you breathe in 100 units of oxygen, and then you breathe out 50 units of oxygen. And so let's...
Elena, I gave very clear reasons why strength matters. So, yeah. Thank you very much, Frost. Bye.
say that means your VO2 max is 50. No, that's probably the wrong way to say that. So you breathe out 50 units of oxygen, but you run a little bit more, you do some training, you do a 10-week program, and then you go back to the VO2 meter, a VO2 max meter, and you're going to breathe in 100 units of oxygen, and then you're going to breathe out 30 units of oxygen. Your oxygen utilization has gone up by 20 units of oxygen because you breathe out less oxygen.
Actually, though, you know what? Since I could at least give the illusion of freedom of speech, here's the donations. Because unlike Sean of Think Before You Simp, I will read out every message that you send me money for, and there's even a text-to-speech option, which means I don't have a choice. All right, we'll continue now and see if anyone else decides to drop a couple bucks in. Links pinned at the top of the chat.
And this is one of our currently our best determinant of actual aerobic fitness. So this is the number people try to increase when they're trying to make an athlete run further, whether it's like they're a marathon runner, or maybe let's go back to the UFC. You want to produce a good UFC fight, so you're going to train VO2 max. That way you can last your 5 rounds of 5 minutes, as opposed to gassing out of the first round. Because I got to say, untrained 5 minutes of a fight is like forever. Now here's where the differences get a lot bigger. In terms of strength, women have traditionally been regarded as the weaker sex. Again, despite the fact that they have all the evidence in front of them that women are actually weaker and they're actually physically less capable, they're still this is still a very feminist book. They're still promoting the social construct that which is perceived. It's just perceived that they're the weaker sex. So in terms of strength, women have traditionally been regarded or perceived as the weaker sex. And which is weird because the way they write this, they flip it around. Where it's like, well, that's actually correct, even though we're trying to say it's wrong. In fact, women are approximately 40 to 60% weaker than men in upper body strength, but only 25 to 30% weaker in lower body strength. So the feminism is strong. It's like, oh, they had this over here. They're 40, 60%, but only this here. Those are still pretty massive differences. Those are different enough to win every single. So if you ever listen to Jordan Peterson, he talks about rats quite a bit from a guy named Jaak Paintsep, who wrote in a book called Affective Neuroscience. And what he would do is do a bunch of rat experiments. And one of the experiments he did was to measure how rats play.
Now, curious again, because look at this textbook, the more I see these words, the more I think like, okay, 40 to 60% weaker, but relative to what? Like, is that just the average woman that's weaker? Or is that a woman who attempts to achieve a similar level of fitness? Like, throwing these numbers out, I mean, they're probably not wrong, but they also lack the context for why is this wrong? Is this because women in general are just less fit than men, or did they subject men and women to an identical training regimen and observe the differences? Because, like, is it a matter of bone density? Men have denser bones. They have more muscle mass, and they will grow it faster and thicker and larger. It's an interesting question that, well, while this seems accurate, it's missing some context that I'd like. But, okay, let's be honest. This is a textbook. I mean, it's been a while since I've read a university textbook, but sorely lacking in deeper information.
And so rats will wrestle, and they have kind of this moral code where if you're the rat that wins every single time and you don't ever let the little rat win, well, then the little rat will never ask you to play again or will never want to play with you. And so all you have to be to win every single time, to win every single wrestling match with a rat, is 30% stronger or 30% bigger than the smaller rat. You'll win every time. So these are pretty big differences. Now, it didn't say in the book what types of people these were, because I imagine if you actually had trained people, the differences would be a lot bigger than 60%. I think the differences would be massively bigger than 60%, because if you look at things like you can just, I'll give you some Google homework. You can look up the biggest well, actually I've got it right here, so I can just say what it is. You look up the world record for a deadlift. The world record for a female deadlift is 573 pounds. That's not trivial, but I could get nowhere near 570 pounds. I'd have to train for years to get that. But when you look at the and this is like, there's a video, I forget what video. It's like if you look on Netflix and you look at one of the weightlifting videos for like documentaries like Pumping Iron, the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. It's not that movie, but it's somewhere else. It's one of those weightlifting documentaries. There's a guy in there. He doesn't do it in the documentary, but if you look at his record afterwards, where he does a world record deadlift, and this guy's like bleeding out of his nose. He's like about to collapse. So this is like 573 is like, I'm about to die when I lift this. So 573 is the best female deadlift. The best male deadlift is 1,155. Let me repeat that because I messed that up. 1,155 pounds.
573. 1155. That's what? 582? World record. We'll see if he mentions the math here, but 500. Wait. That is over twice. Like legit, that's more than twice. Literally more than doubling the weight if I did the math right.
So that is almost twice. No. Sorry, there's more than twice what women can do in terms of deadlift. Double the strength. Again, massive deal. And if you actually look at the guy who is the strongest man, the strongest deadlifter, he looks way stronger. He looks way bigger than the strongest female.
Those forearms are tiny. That's the thing. Like she looks buff. I'll give her that. But I'll be honest. Like aside from the biceps, I guess what the lats for the back, and I assume the pecs under the bodysuit. That's it. That still looks tiny. Look, I work with guys who are bigger and bulkier than that. And all they do is fucking lift heavy shit all day. Not even this heavy shit. Damn.
So, as we have it here, now we have the claim as it was made at the beginning of the video. By the way, I'll link that video that I posted in the description because there's some more interesting things that were said that I didn't put in the small clip I put up. But as we can see, which is something that we already know, we have the evidence, we have the case, we have the back and insides. Oh, by the way, this little thing on the screen where it says, however, because of the considerable size, the next part of that paragraph isn't that interesting. It basically just says that if you put men and women pound for pound, male muscle is not stronger than female muscle. But that doesn't matter because men are always bigger than women. So it's like if you had a 130 male and a 130 female and they had the same body fat, well then you would have equal amounts of strength output. But again, that's not a realistic situation because most men, even it said on average, men are 5 inches bigger. Men are 40 pounds heavier or so. So we have the facts.
I'm somewhat skeptical of that because I mean, like I say, a 130-pound male versus a 130-pound female. My understanding is that guys have greater muscle density and greater bone density. A 130-pound male with equivalent muscle mass to a female would probably look smaller than the female. If you made it where it was equivalent, I'm willing to bet that the guy would look smaller. He'd have to, because higher bone density would mean that a woman would need more bone to equate a man's bone density. Higher muscle density would mean that a woman would require more physical volume of muscle. Now, pound for pound is one thing, but weight versus density means that a woman with equivalent strength to a man, pound for pound, would physically look bigger than him and yet be equal in strength. Like, chat, correct me if I'm wrong or misguided on this.
In a very feminist style textbook, they will still say that men are considerably stronger than women. And of course we have to, because we have to provide the meals, we have to protect, we have to fight all the wars, because it makes the most sense, because men are the expendable ones. So if you have women fighting wars, well, you're going to lose, because one man can impregnate 100 women, whereas one woman can only be impregnated by one man. So of course you're going to make the sex that is more disposable the one that goes and fights all the wars, and you're going to embody that by making them the stronger sex. Or you're going to make sure they do all the heavy lifting. So, well, for whatever reason that was taken. Or you need to do all the hunting, because when you hunt stuff and you don't have modern technology, the shit fights back. So if you're going to hunt a mammoth, the mammoth's going to say no, and it's going to fight back. And, well, one of you may die, or one of you may be injured. So, well, you don't want them there for that. Anyway, I just thought I'd point that out. I really can't stand when people make frivolous claims like that, things that are just flat out obvious. Women are not as strong as men. Women are not as aggressive as men. Especially in the extremes. Especially when as soon as you hit those extremes, like I said, the strongest male versus the strongest female, the strongest male is twice as, well, in terms of deadlifts, the strongest male is twice as strong. All right, anyway, hope you enjoyed that. I will see you in the next one. And go ahead and give this, if you like this video, go ahead and give it a like. Go ahead and give the channel a subscribe. And I will see you in the next one. Currently, science is one.
All right, so that was Sean's first video. I mean, for a first video, it's pretty good, I'd say. I mean, a lot further that it could go, a lot more